Welcome to Reimagining Chapel. My name is Amanda Esco, and I am the director of the Religious Education Program here at the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. I am so glad you are here with me today. I'd love us to begin like we begin all of our worship services by lighting a chalice. This is a chalice, like one of the ones that we dropped off at your homes this fall. And if we didn't and you still need one, get in touch with me and I can help get one to you. This one was painted by our loving religious education assistant, Lissa Lander. We'll hear from her later when we have our Wonder Box. Symbol of light, symbol of knowledge, symbol of warmth, symbol of freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. I'm going to put our chalice down here on our altar. And you want to hear something neat? Do you remember our paintings that we have in Little Chapel that you all lovingly worked on a few years ago? This weekend, another congregation in La Crosse, Wisconsin is actually using these images along with our 8 Principles song in their Sunday worship to talk about the 8 Principles. Isn't that neat? I think it's really interesting how this virtual church we have built almost over this whole year has grown and connected us with others in our faith in ways that we would have never had happen before. I find beauty in this hardness at this time. It's hard living in the middle of a pandemic, we found out. It's hard being a student at home. It's hard working from home. It's hard being separated from those that are close to us. But we've been able to reach our connections out wider, spread that idea of who's in our community, who's in our family, who's in our family, in a wider net. Remember, that's what we talked about last weekend in Reimagining Chapel and in religious education. How our love grows beyond bounds, outside of those ripples into our community. And that's what we saw this week. Part of our larger community reached out to us for connection. I'm amazed at how far we have come this year. We're going to have to think of some ways to honor that. Wow. I'd love us today to begin by taking a few deep breaths. I'd like us to center ourselves with a quiet moment and deep breathing. It helps focus our minds and gets our hearts in the place it needs to be to listen. Remember, we've talked a lot about our heart listening. All right, let's take some deep breaths in through our nose and out through our mouth. Are you ready? Okay. Let's begin. Let's take a deep breath in and out. One more time. Feeling the ground on our toes if we are able, or touching the wall, or maybe feeling it with our fingers on the floor. Let's do this one more time. Breathe in, out. Sitting for a moment in the silence of this space. Another practice, a spiritual practice we have in our religious education program is sharing our joys and concerns with one another. And now that you're at home and you're home with the people that love you, share your joys and concerns this week with those people. I'll be right here when you're done, waiting for you. Thank you for sharing your joys and concerns. I say this every week, and it never becomes less important. The people around you that love you the most want to hear from you what's in your hearts and what's on your minds. Keep sharing with them. Share with me. Share with your friends. This is another spiritual practice which brings us closer to our center by sharing ourselves and being vulnerable. Wow, I get the chance to talk about our UU of the Week this week. Remember, this month of Black History Month, we are focusing our UU of the Week stories on Black Unitarian Universalists. And this one today is a particular favorite of mine. So I hope you enjoy. Our UU of the Week was a Jamaican immigrant, a minister, and an activist. His name was Ethelred Brown. Ethelred Brown was born in 1875 in Falmouth, Jamaica. Throughout his early life, he was at odds with the Christian religion of his youth. He didn't believe the same things. He didn't see how the Trinity, or the idea that God was broken into three parts, was possible. Later, he went to his uncle's house, who just so happened to have a pamphlet on the idea of Unitarianism from none other than former UU of the Week highlight, Reverend William Ellery Channing. This idea of God stayed with him and kept yearning within him. And as he grew older and got married and started a family of his own, it kept gnawing on him. After being fired from his job as an accountant with the government, Ethelred had a spiritual crisis and decided to become a minister. He had a few problems, though. The first and most pressing was that he knew of no other Unitarians in real life at all. He was sure, though, if he started a church in Jamaica, people would attend. Desperate, he mailed a letter addressed to any Unitarian minister in New York City, asking how to become a minister and start a church. Eventually, he received a reply telling him the only way was to attend theological school in the United States. Leaving his family behind, Ethelred set off for America. Unfortunately and unsurprisingly with the U.S. immigration system, even then, he was sent back for not having the right papers. Once home, he was able to get the right papers, but it took him another 3 years to save enough money to try again. He was finally able to attend and went to the Meadville Theological School from 1910 to 1912. Ordained in 1912, Ethelred is considered to be one of the first, if not the first, Black Unitarian minister. He left the United States to return to Jamaica and his family to spread the good news of Unitarianism. Unitarian missionary work was difficult in Jamaica, and soon Ethelred and his family had their sights set on coming to America. They arrived in Harlem, New York, and soon began the Harlem Community Church. This church was a radical center for the Harlem community. Several socialist groups working on economic restoration met at the church, along with the very secretive African Blood Brotherhood organization, which Ethelred himself was the chaplain for. The politics and Ethelred as a person left the very white, very conservative American Unitarian Association aghast. Annoyed, they viewed Reverend Ethelred Brown as a nuisance, and in 1929 dropped his fellowship. Racism and racist thoughts permeated this decision and the American Unitarian Association at the time. Seeing this blatant act of racism against him, Reverend Brown threatened legal action with the ACLU, and in 1935, his fellowship was reinstated. He continued to serve the Harlem Community Church for 35 years. Reverend Ethelred Brown is remembered for his pioneering work with race, politics, and humanist theology within our Unitarian Universalist history. His story of resilience is also remembered in our hymnal with his hymn, I'm on my way.
Hi, I'm Lissa Lamb Religious Education Assistant at the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. Should we see what's in the Wonder Box today? I don't hear much. Let's see. It's a painting of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that my daughter made for school. And, let's see, this says, "What is the beloved community?" Well, I know that Martin Luther King Jr. envisioned a beloved community, a society based on justice, equal opportunity, and love of one's fellow human beings. MLK's wife, Coretta Scott King, runs the King Center, which is an institute dedicated to promoting King's ideas. She explains the beloved community like this. Dr. King's beloved community is a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. That sounds amazing, but how do we get there? Unitarian Universalists are working towards making a beloved community a reality. We have long stood on the side of equality and social justice, but just like many predominantly white groups of people, we have recently learned that we still have a lot of work to do. Black Lives UU, or BLUE, has proposed an 8th principle, which says, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions." Dr. King and Black Lives UU remind us that when any part of our society suffers, we all suffer. True justice and equality make all of our lives better, but we can't just react to injustice. We have to actively seek out injustice in ourselves and our community and work to change it every day. The King Center has a pledge on their website, thekingcenter.org, which challenges you to be love. It says, "I acknowledge 3 things. 1, the violence, oppression, inequity, injustice, and hate in our world has to stop. 2, I have a responsibility and role to play in creating social change for a more just, humane, equitable, and peaceful world. And 3, the decision is mine whether to do nothing in this moment or to have the courage to stand up for justice. And I have made my decision. Starting today, I make a personal choice to be love. I pledge to allow love to drive my thoughts, words, decisions, and actions, and honor the humanity of every individual. I pledge to speak the truth to power in love. I pledge to focus on defeating injustice and not destroying the person. I pledge to support leaders who demonstrate a love for humanity. I pledge to promote unity and refuse to perpetuate or magnify division. I pledge to demonstrate a life of courage, care, and compassion as I boldly confront anything that stands in opposition to love." Those are all really amazing goals, and I'm excited to start working on that. By signing that pledge, we can all help create what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community. You can find it online. And you can find more amazing episodes of The Wonder Box and Reimagining Chapel on YouTube. Go to slcuu.org to find out more about the First Unitarian Church and our work in the world. Thanks for joining us.
Each person is important. To be kind in all you do. 3, help each other.